Hello everyone, I am Rachin V.A. Patosa, and I will continue the report on Chapter 3, from Keynesian economics to neoliberalism. So what are the objectives? First, to define what a developmental state is and its factors. Second, to be able to understand the structures in a developmental state. And third, to discover what are the structures in development economics. So, what is development state? Development state, it is a parallel conception to Keynesianism that drew from it in several respects and was employed during the post-war years. So when we say parallel, it is mauna siya ang kaatbang or pareha ang iyang goal or ang tumong. So this development state followed when Japan also had its developmental state. So this developmental state happened during the Meiji Restoration in 1868. So Meiji Restoration was the dissolution of feudal state of government and restoration of the imperial state of government. So Japan established state-owned model factories in a number of industries. So they were able to make steel, shipbuilding, mining, textiles, and armaments. Infant industries were protected by tariffs placed on the importation of competing products, while raw material imports were subsidized. So when we say subsidized, it is supported or paid by the government or an organization. So the state encouraged the rationalization of key industries to restrain wasteful competition, achieved economies of scale, and introduced scientific management. So, mauna ni pod siya na ang Japanese state system was a competent bureaucracy staffed by the country's brightest students and dedicated to devising and implementing a planned process of economic development. So one way ng Japan to develop a state is by depending on their own people. So there are students who were so capable enough to give changes to its state. So mauna ni nag-rise ang pilot agency. So it was supported by the MITI or the Japan's Ministry of International Trade and Industry. So Japan's MITI was the one who ensured that the indigenous business was being supported. So Japan was very supportive on its local products or local workers. So Japanese planners were able to guide the initial industrialization and subsequent industrial upgrading as new, more valuable industries and supported. Example, it's engineering, automobiles, electronics, while older ones just like shoes, textiles, or toys, they were encouraged to move offshore where there is a cheaper input costs is available, remaining under Japanese, of course, under the Japanese control. So in East Asian, in South Korea, Taiwan, and Vietnam, developmental states gave substantial, well-designed export subsidies to industries. States regulated the entry of firms into key industries and restricted intercompany competition. States were actively involved in enhancing countries' scale bases and technological capabilities. So, East Asian, kanina mga countries kay ginabawal nila ang mga foreign investors na musulod sa ila because they wanted to focus on their own. That's why, as what we can observe or see today, naglambo jud ang mga ang kasagara countries na naa sa East Asian. Unlike diri sa Philippines, of course, na biskan og saon gasalig kita lang gasalig sa gawas. So let us now go to structuralism and import substitution. So when we say structuralism, it studies the underlying unconscious regularities of human expression. Actually, this focuses mainly on the structures or the culture of the people. Import substitution, the idea that blocking imports of manufactured goods. So, mauni ni sila ang nagprohibit ng mga import from other countries or other state, but instead they focus on their own para maglambo sila, not using other states' money or power. Just like in Latin America, a school of thought emerged that was critical of certain aspects of classical economic doctrine, contested by a structuralist approach to development state. So mao na to, it was found conventional economics too abstract and often advocated with Keynes and the Social Democrats state intervention in the growth process. So there are two main areas of economic practice. Dili lang siya naisip na murag basta-basta lang, but there are actually two main areas of economic practice. First is the inflation. So when we say inflation, it is a general rise in the price level in an economy over a period of time. So nagsobra kataas ang mga presyo ng mga palitunon. Conventional monetarist economists argued that inflation was caused by excessive increases in the supply of money. That is why nadili jud pwede na mudaghan ang atong kwarta kay moingon sila na ngano pobre man ang ing-ana, why not make more money? Pero pag magibuhat pod kitag daghan nga money, mas mugamay ang kantidad ng kwarta. So it could be resolved only by such structural changes as land reform, import substitution. Pero import substitution, just like becoming dependent on your own manufacturers rather than foreign manufacturers. It could also be resolved through education and improved fiscal systems. So example ng inflation kay itong nahitabo sad sa Latin America. Latin America had experienced inflation of from 80% to 100% per year. So grabe jud na pagmahal sa ila dito. The second one is the trade theory. It is explaining the existing patterns of trade, the impact on the domestic economy. So in early development strategies had favored an outward-oriented economic model in which countries provided primary goods. So when we say primary goods, isa na ang coffees, isa na pod ang wheat, isa na pod ang copper, ang mga products ra gyud na makita sa inyong own place. And it can already support local workers or the farmers. So the main tenets of this theory were Raul Prebisch, and he was a former head of the Central Bank of Argentina, and Hans Singer, a U.S. economist in what became known as the Singer-Prebisch thesis. So the economic homogeneous system. So in Europe, Prebisch showed that the terms of trade for center countries had improved with industrialization. Technical advance benefited the center countries rather than the entire world. While in the United States, Prebisch concluded that Latin America's underdevelopment was due to its emphasis on primary exports. So mao lagi na kay nagsalig man gud ang America sa mga exports. Mao to nagka-problem sila di ana. So conventional economic, there are reasons of its failures based on Prebish. He said that markets in the center were characterized by imperfect competition and price reductions. The income elasticity of demand is higher for industrial goods, just like electronics, than for primary goods like food. So there is also a solution in structural change in peripheral economies. So industrialization using an import substitution strategy. So mauna ni siya ang replacing industrial imports with domestic production. Mao dapat na, just like what Japan did to its country. So import substitution industrialization, or the ISI, led to significant structural changes in the Latin American economies in the post-World War II era. From the GDP of 19.6% in 1967, it became 24.1%. So ISI was widely adopted in Latin America. So structuralist development economist, it attempts to identify specific rigidities, lags, and others characteristics of the structure of developing economies that affect economic adjustments. Structuralist economists argue that developing countries had features that set them apart from the economies theorized by orthodox economics. So let us now go to the development economics, the balanced growth. So what the development economics balanced growth? It focused specifically on developing countries, and it had greater practicality in terms of more immediate policy orientation. So actually, development economics assumed that economic processes in developing countries were distinct from those of developed countries, as structuralists argue. Development economics eventually settled that neoclassical economies was not inapplicable to third world development. So here are some main positions of structuralist development in economics. So first is the dualistic development. When we say dualistic development, it is the idea that a modern commercial sector developed alongside a traditional subsistence sector, resulting in a dual economy in poor countries. The second one is mobilizing domestic resources. It is the idea that find ways of increasing the savings rate and mobilizing domestic savings, of course through banks and other financial institutions, making domestic funds available for productive investment in poor countries. So third, mobilizing foreign resources. It might remain a savings gap and foreign exchange gap, which could be filled from external sources through public financial aid, loans, private foreign investment, and non-monetary transfers of managerial and technological knowledge. The fourth one, industrialization strategy. So industrialization should produce, often in labor-intensive, capital-saving ways, the most basic producer and consumer goods required, particularly by rural people. Fifth one, agricultural strategy. Progress in agriculture was thought essential for providing food and raw materials. Mauni na siya na dapat mag-focus sa agriculture, especially sa panahon karon. Not naman, especially sa panahon karon kay grabe na jud ang progress in agriculture nga part. So 6, trade strategy. It is a development economies were originally divided on whether free trade increased international inequalities or could contribute to the development. So seventh, which is the development planning and policy making, it is that some development economists voiced criticisms of the market mechanism as ineffective, unreliable, or irrelevant to the problems faced by developing countries. So they have found a need to supersede markets with state planning. 8. Project appraisal. It is investment resources scarce in developing countries. There was a particular need for the rational allocation of capital, and thus for development project appraisals by governments and international agencies just like the World Bank. And the last one, the human source development. Human source development is the accumulation of material capital was to be paralleled by investment in human capital. That is, it is by improving the quality of people as productive agents, changing abilities and skills, even modifying motivations and values. So its history. Development economics was founded in Britain during and shortly after World War II. Its founding economists doubted the usefulness of neoclassical economics, with its presumptions of smoothly operating markets, and saw the state as playing a key role in the development process. The basic idea was that investment was restricted by the small size of the market in poor regions. So in conclusion, we could really see that a development state is highly focusing on its development by using its domestic products or domestic manufacturers. So in order daw to develop, kay dili mag-depend or mag-focus sa mga foreign investors. Dili basta-basta na mag-ilara lamang ang gamiton, kundi gamiton pod ang resources from your place. Kay kinsa raman pod ang magtabang-tabang, kundi ang mismong lugar lang man or ang mismong state. So makonclude sab na dakong tabang ang if we are governed by the state, enough na para maglambo kitang tanan. And not to mention na lang na needed gyud na, as especially today, but as what we have observed, lahi na pod ang ginahimo ng state. So that would be all. Thank you.